The rain had been falling all evening, the kind that soaked through shoes and settled into your bones. Lena pulled her jacket tighter as she hurried across the empty parking lot behind the grocery store, her shift finally over. Her feet ached, her head throbbed, and all she could think about was getting home to check on her sleeping son. The night felt too quiet. No cars, no voices, just the hum of a flickering streetlight and the steady drip of water from the roof. Then she heard it. A thin, broken cry cut through the rain. Lena stopped mid-step, her heart clenched. It wasn't the cry of a cat or the wail of an alarm. It was a baby. No, babies. Two of them, crying out of sync, frightened and desperate. She followed the sound toward the alley behind the store, every instinct screaming at her to be careful, but louder still was the pull of a mother's heart. What she saw made her gasp. A man sat slumped against the brick wall, his expensive coat darkened with blood. His face was pale, jaw clenched in pain, but his arms were locked tightly around two infants pressed against his chest. He had wrapped his coat around them like a shield, his body curved protectively despite the blood seeping through his fingers. One baby had gone quiet, thumb in its mouth. The other cried weakly, tiny face red and wet. "Oh my God," Lena whispered, rushing forward. The man's eyes snapped open. They were sharp, alert, even through the pain. "Please," he said hoarsely. His voice trembled, not with fear for himself, but for the children. They were trying to take them. I couldn't let them. He coughed, and blood stained his lips. Don't let them go." Lena dropped to her knees without thinking. She pressed her scarf against the wound, hands steady despite the terror pounding in her chest. "You're going to be okay," she said, though she wasn't sure if she was lying. "I'm here. I've got them." The baby in his arms whimpered as Lena gently lifted him, then the other, cradling them close. They were warm, alive. She felt a rush of fierce relief. With shaking fingers, she called emergency services, barking out the location, begging them to hurry. As sirens echoed in the distance, the man's grip finally loosened. His eyes fluttered shut, his head falling back against the wall. Lena held the twins tighter, rocking them softly as rain soaked her hair. She didn't know who this man was. She didn't know why someone would shoot him and leave him bleeding in the dark. All she knew was this. A father had nearly died protecting his children, and she wasn't going anywhere. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and wet clothes. Lena stood under harsh fluorescent lights, her jacket dripping onto the tiled floor as nurses rushed past her, pushing the gurney that carried the wounded man toward the operating room. His hand slipped from the edge of the stretcher, fingers brushing the air as if still searching for the babies. Lena's throat tightened as the doors swung shut, leaving her alone in the hallway, alone, except for the twins in her arms. A nurse glanced at her. "Are those his?" Lena hesitated for half a second, then nodded. Yes, it wasn't a lie, not really. Right now, they needed her. She was guided into a quiet room while doctors worked. Someone handed her towels, another offered a bottle and formula. Lena cleaned the babies gently, wiping rain and dried blood from their cheeks. Up close, she noticed how different they were. One with dark hair and serious eyes, the other softer, rounder, already drifting toward sleep. They clung to her fingers with surprising strength, as if afraid she might disappear. "It's okay," she whispered, rocking them the way she used to rock her own child when money was tight and nights were long. "Mama's here." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her chest ached, but the babies relaxed, their cries fading into small, exhausted sighs. Hours passed. Nurses came and went, assuming she was family. No one questioned why she stayed. She sat in the vinyl chair all night, feeding them, burping them, humming lullabies her mother once sang to her. Every time the door to the operating wing opened, her heart jumped. A police officer eventually approached, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions." Lena answered calmly, telling him exactly what she'd seen and nothing more. She hadn't noticed the shooter's face. She hadn't heard names. She'd only heard babies crying and done what any mother would do. The officer studied her for a moment, then nodded, his voice softening. "You did the right thing." Just before dawn, a doctor emerged, exhaustion etched into his face. "He's alive," he said. "Stable, but critical." Lena let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked down at the twins asleep against her chest, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect rhythm. They didn't know how close they'd come to losing everything. They only knew warmth, safety, and the steady heartbeat beneath them. Lena brushed a kiss across each tiny forehead. She hadn't planned to stay this long. She hadn't planned on caring for two strangers, babies through the night. But as the sun began to rise outside the hospital windows, one truth settled deep in her bones. Until their father opened his eyes, she wasn't leaving them alone. Morning light crept through the hospital windows, pale and cold. Lena shifted in her chair, her arms stiff from holding the twins for hours. One of them stirred, blinking up at her with wide gray eyes that seemed far too serious for such a tiny face. She smiled tiredly and adjusted the blanket, unaware that the quiet around her was about to break. The first sign was the change in the hallway. Two men in dark suits appeared, their shoes too clean, their movements too controlled. They didn't rush like doctors or shuffle like exhausted relatives. They scanned the floor with sharp eyes, murmuring into earpieces. Moments later, a pair of uniformed security guards joined them. Nurses straightened, voices lowered. Lena's stomach tightened. A woman in her 40s approached, elegant but not unkind. "Ms. Rivera," she asked gently, glancing at the babies. "I'm Eleanor Grant, legal counsel for Adrian Hale." The name barely registered at first. Then it hit her. Adrian Hale, the billionaire, the ghost CEO whose companies owned hospitals, banks, and half the skyline downtown. Lena's fingers curled protectively around the twins. I didn't know," she said quietly. "I just found him." Eleanor studied her, not with suspicion, but with something like relief. "We know. The security footage confirms your statement. If not for you, the outcome could have been very different." She paused. "There was an attempted abduction last night. Mr. Hale took the bullet meant to stop him from protecting his children." Lena swallowed hard, the image of the blood-soaked alley flashing in her mind. "Is he going to be okay?" "He's strong," Eleanor replied. "And stubborn." As if summoned by her words, a nurse hurried over. "He's awake," she whispered. Asking for the babies. They were led to the recovery room, where machines hummed softly. Adrian Hale looked nothing like the powerful figure Lena had seen on magazine covers. He was pale, weakened, his arm bandaged, but his eyes were fierce with worry. They locked onto the twins the moment Lena stepped inside. "You're safe," Lena said softly, stepping closer. "They're safe." Adrian's breath hitched. Tears filled his eyes as he reached out, careful, trembling. "Thank you," he said, voice breaking. "They wouldn't stop crying, and I couldn't hold on much longer." "You held on long enough," Lena replied. He looked at her then. Not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a father who had nearly lost everything. "I don't know your name," he said. "Lena," he nodded, memorizing it. "Lena, I owe you my children's lives." She shook her head gently. "You already paid the price. You protected them." In that quiet room, surrounded by beeping machines and unspoken truths, Lena realized something had shifted. She hadn't just crossed paths with a powerful man. She had stepped into a story that was far bigger than she ever imagined. The recovery room felt smaller once the others stepped out. The lawyers, the security team, even the nurses faded into the background, leaving only the steady beep of machines and the quiet breathing of the twins. Lena stood beside the bed, unsure if she should stay or go. She had already done more than anyone could ask. Adrian watched her closely. "They're calm with you," he said softly. "They haven't been calm since last night." Lena looked down at the babies, one asleep against her shoulder, the other blinking lazily. "They've been through a lot," she replied. "They just need to feel safe." He nodded slowly, pain flickering across his face as he shifted. "I built an empire to protect my family," he said. "Security, walls, power. And in the end, none of it mattered in that alley." His voice broke. All that mattered was that someone stopped. That someone cared. Silence stretched between them, heavy but honest. Adrian took a breath. "I can never repay you," he continued. "But I won't insult you with a check and a thank you card." He met her eyes. "I need help. Not staff. Not employees. Someone I trust." Lena stiffened. "I don't belong in your world." "Maybe not," he said. "But my children already chose you." She hesitated. Memories of long shifts, unpaid bills, and lonely nights flashing through her mind. This wasn't about money. It was about two tiny lives who had clung to her in the dark. "I can stay," she said carefully. "Until you're strong enough." Relief washed over Adrian's face. "That's all I'm asking." Days passed. Adrian healed slowly. Lena learned the twins' rhythms. The way one liked to be rocked, the other preferred soft humming. The hospital room felt less like a place of fear and more like the beginning of something fragile and real. For the first time in years, Adrian slept without nightmares. For the first time in months, Lena felt seen. When Adrian was finally cleared to leave, he didn't go to a mansion. He chose a quiet house under guard, somewhere safe but human. Lena walked out with him, the twins bundled close, sunlight warming their faces. As they reached the car, Adrian paused. "Whatever happens next," he said, "this family exists because of you." Lena smiled softly, her heart full in a way she hadn't felt in years. Wealth hadn't saved those children. Power hadn't stopped the bullet. Love had.